Hello, welcome back to my channel and to my Fighting Fantasy Gamebook retrospective. Now, imagine that Steve Jackson, the writer of the Sorcery series, had decided to make a series of gamebooks based around Star Trek. So you're like the captain of the Starship Enterprise. You've got a whole crew of different characters and different people to call upon. And you've got to go on this massive journey, right? Like Star Trek Voyager, you're trapped in an alternative universe. And you've got to find a way out of this universe. And so you're going to all these planets that you don't know anything about, meeting aliens. And they might have wars with each other. And you get involved in those wars. And, you can imagine the complexity of that and how much fun that would be to play. How much Steve Jackson could do with it. So each member of your crew had a different personality, and that personality changed and developed as you went through the game book. That would be an absolutely fantastic series of books. Can you imagine 4 or 5 books in that series? Somewhere in an alternative universe, that book series was written, and it is the best game book series ever played anywhere. But we're not in that universe, we're in this universe. And unfortunately, in this universe, Steve Jackson attempted to do this right at the beginning of the Fighting Fantasy series, and he made Starship Traveller. Now, because the series was at its early stage, its simplest stage, he hasn't yet got to the complexity that he'll find with sorcery. And so this falls a bit short of what I've just described. It's a brave attempt by Steve Jackson to do something new with the formula right from the very beginning. He changes the gameplay completely. You do have crew members, but they don't have any personality. They either live or die, basically. And eventually, for all the possibilities, it only adds up to 340 paragraphs. And I remember when I was a kid thinking it should be 400 paragraphs. The first 3 were. And because it was 340, I assumed it was less sophisticated and less clever. And when I was a kid, I had a real downer on this book. I never liked the science fiction fighting fantasy books. I love science fiction. It's probably my favourite genre of fantasy. But I didn't like them in the fighting fantasy game books. I preferred the sort of Tolkien-esque Dungeons & Dragons world. I don't know why. And I felt that this book sort of lacked atmosphere. I also felt it because of the interior illustrations, which I thought were a bit dry, a bit cold. So I had a real downer on this book, but I played it again this week for this video. And I think I was a bit harsh on it. It's actually very entertaining. It's an attempt by Steve Jackson to do something different, and Steve Jackson is such a good writer. He's got such original ideas, and every planet you land on has got something interesting going on, whether, you've got a planet where the children are more intelligent than the adults and people slowly deteriorate in their intelligence. There's another planet where you beam down into someone's body, so you become this kind of alien and you have to try and separate the 2 bodies. It's clear that Steve Jackson has watched a lot of Star Trek and he knows the kind of stories that appear in Star Trek, and they're all replicated here really well. There's another interesting story right from the beginning where it's a planet full of very diverse people from all over the place, who've all immigrated into this world, and they've all got equal status, and so no one actually ever does anything, and nothing ever gets achieved. Interesting comment there, Steve. But it's very interesting. All the worlds have got something interesting going on, and there's interesting things to do. The problem, I think, is that the gameplay is a bit dull. Right, it's all based around decision making. Right, there's not much sort of, fighting going on. There's not much, room for manoeuvre. You just say, do this, then someone says something, then you do that, and then someone says something, then you go back to the ship. It's a bit dull, really. It doesn't have the same. You don't have that same sense of mucking in and getting involved in the sort of the Dungeons and Dragons style adventures. And I think that's what's lacking about it. I also think that the crew members, if the crew members were like Spock and McCoy and Scotty and had some kind of personality, it would give the book so much more texture. It would make it so much more fun. So that, for example, when one of your crew actually dies, then it would have real power, and then you'd have to replace them, have to build a new relationship. That's what I mean about it being better as a series of books. As it is, it's sort of trapped in a 340 paragraph, quite simplistic game book. It's not bad. I like the fact that you can get to the end and you're trying to get out of the black hole back into the real universe. and there's a sort of red herring. There's a couple of red herring pieces of information you're given. That's a nice touch, right? So there's a sense in which the planets you visit matters, and there's a more sort of sense of a freer kind of gameplay that you get than you get, for example, in the Forest of Doom or most of Ian Livingstone's game books. So this one's gone up in my estimation. Forest of Doom went down a little bit. This one has definitely gone up a bit. I enjoyed the situations. I enjoyed the worlds you visit. I thought there was some genuine innovation and originality there. I just think that this came along at the wrong time in the Fighting Fantasy series. And I wish that Steve Jackson had tried it a bit later on, because then it would have been more sophisticated. It would have had more depth. Quick mention of the illustrations. I love the cover, which is by Peter Andrew Jones. I think that's a great cover. And he also does the illustrations inside. Looking at those illustrations again, they suit the book. When I first read this book, I thought they were a bit dead. They didn't have as much life in them. But actually they suit the book, I think. And I was being a bit harsh on them. I was a bit harsh on this book in general. It's pretty good. So thanks very much for that. And next time I'll look at City of Thieves.